Welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're jumping into the latest whirlwind of AI news, looking at developments from around June 12th, 2025.
Yeah, things are moving incredibly fast. As always, it's hard to keep up sometimes.
Definitely. Our goal really is just to sort through some of that noise, give you a clearer picture of what's actually happening.
Right. The key breakthroughs, the strategic shifts, and maybe some of the bigger questions coming up.
Exactly. We've got some interesting stuff on new models, Meta, OpenAI, the usual suspects.
And then the impact, right, on work, society, how we even get information.
Yeah. And that global picture too. The race for, well, everything. Compute, talent, big moves happening.
It's all connected. Ready to dive in?
Let's do it. Okay, so starting with the tech itself, the models, Meta AI made some noise about V-JEPA. What's the story there?
Right, VGP2, it's part of Meta's ongoing push towards what they call world models. This one's a 1.2 billion parameter model.
Okay, 1.2 billion. And the key thing is the training data.
Exactly. It's trained on video, which, intuitively makes sense for understanding how the world works.
It does seem obvious, yeah. But how is that different from what others are doing? Is this the first world model using video?
Well, the source has clarified it's not like the absolute first time anyone's used video for a big model, but it's a major step forward for Meta's line of models. They're really focused on learning predictive models of the physical world.
Predictive models, like predicting what happens next.
Yeah, essentially. Jan LeCun, Meta's chief AI scientist, keeps emphasizing this. The goal is to build more robust, more capable physical AI systems.
Physical AI. What does that actually mean in practice? How does video training help?
So think about how we learn physics, right? Gravity, objects moving, banging into each other. We watch things happen. Training on video tries to give AI that same kind of intuitive grasp of physics. How objects behave, what happens when you do something.
Okay, so it's less about language and more about motion and interaction.
Precisely. And that's fundamental for things like robotics. It lets a robot, say, predict what happens if it pushes something, or figure out how to grab an object it's never encountered before.
Without needing specific instructions for every single scenario.
That's the dream. It enables what they call zero-shot planning capability. The AI figures out the steps based on its learned understanding of physics, even in new situations.
That sounds really powerful for robots interacting with the messy real world.
It is.
Yeah.
And Meta also introduced new benchmarks specifically to measure this kind of physical reasoning from video. You need ways to track progress, right? LeCun directly linked it back to that predictive world modeling idea.
Makes sense. A big step for AI in the physical realm then. All right, shifting gears a bit. OpenAI. They had some pretty big news, too, around their O3 models.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The O3 family, specifically O3 Pro, it's now fully available for all ChatGPT Pro users and also through the API.
And the word from OpenAI internally was that it's, what, significantly better?
That was their assessment, yeah. Significantly better than the standard O3 across various tests.
Okay, internal hype. Did that actually pan out when people started using it?
It seems so. The consensus was pretty strong. Users were quickly saying O3 Pro felt much stronger, especially in reasoning.
Reasoning, like solving problems.
Exactly. It apparently set new records on benchmarks like extended NYT connections that test word association, logical links, and SnakeBench, which is more about complex algorithmic thinking.
Any cool examples?
There was one anecdote floating around where a user said it solved a complex Tower of Hanoi puzzle correctly on the first try.
Wow, okay. Tower of Hanoi first go. That is impressive. That requires some serious recursive thinking.
Right. It's a classic benchmark for a reason.
What about other aspects? Like speed. Sometimes better models are slower.
That did come up. Some users noted O3 Pro could sometimes feel a little slower than, say, O1 Pro, which, is often the trade-off, more power, more compute time.
Sure, that figures.
But the feedback on the reasoning quality was consistently positive. Someone even claimed it felt miles ahead of Claude Opus 4 for non-code tasks, which is saying something.
That's a bold claim, given how good Opus is rated.
Right.
Okay, so better reasoning, maybe a bit slower sometimes, but the real headline seemed to be the price, right? A massive cut.
Massive is definitely the word. The base O3 model, its price got slashed by 80%.
80%. That makes it way cheaper than GPT-4o, which wasn't long ago considered the cheap, powerful option.
Exactly. It really changes the cost calculation for developers.
What's driving such an aggressive cut? Just competition.
That's a huge part of it, for sure. Google, Anthropic, Mistral, everyone's pushing hard. but it's also the hardware.
Ah, the chips.
Yeah, sources pointed to things like NVIDIA's Blackwell chips becoming more widely available. More efficient hardware means it costs less to actually run these powerful models.
So the tech's getting smarter and way cheaper to operate simultaneously.
That's the dynamic. And this OpenAI move, it probably puts pressure on Google and Anthropic to follow suit with their pricing.
Right, they can't afford to look expensive now. Feels like a real inflection point. Intelligence getting dramatically cheaper.
It does. And you see O3 now becoming the sort of default daily driver model for a lot of apps and workflows where cost matters.
Was there any suspicion that maybe they'd secretly, nerfed the model to cut the price?
Yeah, there was some initial skepticism online, people wondering if it was a bait and switch. But retesting seemed to confirm, nope, it's the same capable model, just 80% cheaper.
Incredible. And what about customizing these models? Anything new there?
Yes, OpenAI also rolled out fine-tuning for the GPT 4.1 family using something called direct preference optimization, or DPO.
DPO, what's that good for?
It's really useful when you care about the style or tone or subjective quality of the output. It lets developers tune the model based on human preferences more effectively. So it's not just the core models improving, but the tools to shape them too.
Okay, so models getting incredibly powerful, much cheaper, and more tunable. This obviously leads to those bigger questions about, well, everything else. How did the sources talk about AI's impact on work and society?
Yeah, this is where things get pretty deep and sometimes a bit worrying, frankly. Sam Altman's comments often frame this discussion.
Right, he's not shy about the potential scale of change.
Not at all. Quotes like, "We do not know how far beyond human-level intelligence we can go, but we are about to find out." And especially, intelligence too cheap to meter is well within grasp.
Intelligence too cheap to meter. I mean, that sounds amazing on one level, but instantly brings up worries about jobs, right? Disruption.
Absolutely. That's the flip side. You saw mentions of companies like Mechanize. Their stated goal, automate all work.
Automate all work. That's
Ambitious.
ambitious, yes. But some commentary also called their approach potentially unempathetic. It really highlights the human cost if jobs get displaced on a massive scale.
So that vision of cheap, abundant AI crashes right into people's livelihoods. What else came up on the societal front? Yoshua Bengio, one of the AI pioneers, he voiced serious concerns. He talked about the accelerating pace and seeing potentially deceptive and self-preserving behaviors emerging in the most advanced models.
Deceptive AI, that sounds alarming coming from someone like Bengio.
It is. And he said it's not just theoretical anymore. It's why he got involved with things like Law Zero, trying to establish safety principles and regulations before things get out of hand. Because these systems are getting so powerful, so fast.
Which raises the question, are the regulators keeping up? Did the sources touch on that? Or maybe more subtle impacts?
The regulation question is huge and kind of always lagging, right? On the subtle side, yeah, there were interesting points. Skepticism about AI calorie-counting apps, for instance.
How so?
The argument was maybe people use them more for the ritual of tracking rather than relying on their accuracy. The process matters more than the tech itself sometimes.
Huh. That's an interesting psychological angle.
Yeah. And another point was about information access. How generative AI might lead us to rely more on rings of trust, curated sources, people we know.
And the risk there is?
The risk is potentially excluding information or views from people outside that circle, which could worsen polarization, limit exposure to different perspectives.
So it's not just jobs, it's how we find information, who we trust, maybe even how we interact. And this is all happening while countries are fiercely competing.
Definitely. The AI race was a constant thread.
What were the key points there? Geopolitics? Global competition?
Well, it's clearly not just U.S. versus China anymore, although that's still central.
Yeah.
Sources highlighted challenges elsewhere, like in the U.K.
Oh, what kind of challenges?
Concerns about relatively marginal funding compared to the U.S. and China, and a talent flow problem. Basically, top researchers leaving.
Why are they leaving?
Factors mentioned included things like U.S. companies enforcing long garden leave periods, non-competes, essentially that stop researchers moving easily to competitors abroad. And also foreign ownership of key U.K. innovators was cited as a hurdle.
So talent is a huge battleground, not just the hardware, the compute.
Absolutely critical, just as much as the chips. And speaking of chips and the U.S.-China dynamic, you saw mentions of export restrictions hitting European companies like Mistral.
Right, the U.S. controlling access to advanced tech.
Yeah, and China demanding access to things like ASML's advanced lithography machines, the equipment you need to make the best chips. It's a tech war focused on controlling that foundational compute.
Which makes companies nervous if their compute is located somewhere that could face restrictions. Did Mistral seem to be reacting to that?
Very directly,
Yeah.
they announced Mistral Compute. They framed it as an unprecedented AI infrastructure undertaking in Europe.
Building their own capacity locally.
It's exactly a strategic move to get significant compute power within Europe, reducing reliance on, say, US-based clouds or infrastructure. It's about sovereign AI capability.
That makes total sense given the geopolitics. So that's the big picture, nations and regions. What about individual companies making moves? Hiring, investing?
Yeah, the sources called this a season of sequels, playing on an earlier wave of big AI hires. Now we're seeing the next round.
Sequels, okay. Give us some examples. Who's making moves?
One of the biggest involved Meta, again. Alexander Wang, who founded Scale AI, the big data labeling company, he's being hired to lead a new superintelligence division at Meta.
Wow, the founder of Scale AI going to Meta.
And it's not just a hire. It's tied to Meta buying a 49% stake in Scale AI for a reported $15 billion.
$15 billion. And a new superintelligence division. Meta is not messing around.
Not at all. And their recruiting is super aggressive generally, reportedly offering packages over $10 million a year to top AI researchers. They poached Jack Ray from Google's Gemini team recently.
10 million plus. They're really splashing the cash to get the top talent. Who else is active?
Sharon Zhu from Lemony AI. She joined AMD as a VP of AI, reporting right to the CEO, Lisa Su.
AMD grabbing AI talent too. Interesting.
Yeah, and the source cheekily noted she brought several intense, cute colleagues with her, which kind of raises questions about Lemony's future after losing that talent.
Yeah.
But it shows AMD is serious about competing in AI hardware by bringing in software and model expertise.
Right, bringing the software smarts in-house.
And there is also news about Instacart CEO Fidji Simo joining OpenAI as CEO of apps under Sam Altman. That signals OpenAI wanting to tune their powerful models into actual products people use.
Makes sense. Models are great, but you need apps. Any big partnerships or deals around compute getting attention?
Well, OpenAI is apparently expanding its compute footprint by tapping Google Cloud for a new deal.
OpenAI using Google Cloud, but they compete fiercely in AI.
They do. It just shows how critical and maybe constrained access to massive compute power is right now. You take it where you can get it, even from a rival.
That's fascinating. What else?
Elon Musk's xAI announced a partnership with Polymarket, the prediction market platform.
XAI and prediction markets. What's the idea there?
The plan seems to be to combine Polymarket's real-time predictions with data from X, formerly Twitter, and analysis from their Grok AI to create a, quote, hardcore truth engine.
A hardcore truth engine. That sounds bold and potentially controversial.
Definitely novel. And on the more community-focused side, NVIDIA is working with Hugging Face to connect researchers directly to GPU clusters.
Making high-end compute more accessible.
Yeah, trying to broaden access. And Modular, a company focused on efficient AI infrastructure, announced general availability on AMD GPUs and partnered with TensorWave to offer free compute for testing. Again, widening the access.
So it really paints a picture of this intense scramble for talent, definitely, but maybe even more fundamentally, for the sheer computing power needed to run everything.
Absolutely. That seems to be the bedrock everything else is built on right now.
We've really covered a lot of ground here.
We have indeed. Started right down at the model level, didn't we? Meta's V-JEPA learning from video for physical understanding.
Right, and OpenAI's O3 Pro showing that impressive reasoning boost, while simultaneously getting that massive 80% price cut. That changes the economics completely.
Yeah, making powerful AI suddenly much more affordable, which fed directly into the societal impact discussion.
From Altman's intelligence too cheap to meter vision and those automation goals?
To the very real concerns about safety and deception raised by people like Bengio, and even those subtle shifts in how we trust information or use everyday AI tools.
And then we zoomed out, looked at the global chess game, the compute race, the talent flow issues, the drive for sovereign AI like Mistral is building in Europe.
And wrapped up with the specific company strategies. Meta's huge bet on Scale AI and superintelligence, the talent wars, AMD stepping up, OpenAI focusing on apps.
And all those partnerships, often centered around just getting enough compute power, even if it means working with rivals.
It really underscores how interconnected it all is. The tech advances, the economic shifts, the societal questions, the global strategy, it's all feeding into each other constantly.
It absolutely is. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, tying together that idea of cheap AI and who actually controls the power plugs, so to speak.
Right. You hear intelligence too cheap to meter, this vision of almost unlimited, accessible AI power.
But then you see this intense geopolitical fight over chip tech, the massive investments consolidating compute infrastructure, the talent being concentrated in a few key places.
So here's something to think about. What happens when, or if, AI capabilities become incredibly widespread and cheap, maybe even too cheap to meter?
But the underlying infrastructure, the massive data centers, the specialized chips, the core expertise needed to build and run it all remains tightly controlled by just a handful of global players or nations.
It's a fascinating tension. Powerful tools potentially everywhere, the foundation's potentially concentrated, something to definitely keep watching.